All right, welcome to another edition of Conversations of the Heart. As always, it's your boy T. Till. Special guest here in the building, Dr. Charles Ross. Now, Dr. Ross has, a lot of accolades. Really good guy here. Had a good chance to speak with him briefly the other day. Very impressed. And I listened to the wisdom that he imparts and the gems that he drops whenever the last time we got a chance to talk. But he is I'm just going to read off here because I can't remember all the accolades here, sir. But he is a retired Georgia educator dealing with at-risk students. He taught in Gwinnett, DeKalb, and Rockdale counties at Capella University. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in education, a master's degree in teaching from Western Governors University, and a bachelor's degree in radio, TV, and film from the University of Georgia. He's also a vice president of investments at Wells Fargo. He created and hosted the nationally syndicated radio show, Your Personal Finance, which for 20 years aired in over 100 radio stations across the country, reaching 5 million people each week, and was heard locally on WVEE FM and WAOK AM. So while he was also a personal finance columnist for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, he also authored 2 books on personal finance. One is called Your Common Sense Guide to Personal Finance Planning and God's Plan for Your Financial Success. Also an ordained minister in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. He is a former executive pastor and chief financial officer of New Bethel AME Church and finance chair for Ben Hill United Methodist Church. Born and raised in the Bronx, New York, my favorite city, New York City, where I was born and raised. But most importantly, he is the father of 4 daughters, girl dad, and is also married to his lovely wife, Felicia Ross. A lot there.
I'm tired just listening to all that.
Listen, man, certain bios I can just memorize and I'm good. Quick, fast, right? This one, I said, I got to read this one because I don't want to miss one thing. You've done a lot in your life, sir, and congratulations on all of your success. So I'm going to get into or touch on some of your accolades in just a few minutes. But the most important thing to me, husband, father, girl dad. So give me a little bit about the process, right? So what I want to know is your first daughter, right? What was it like when you found out that you were having your first child and you found out that she was a daughter? Like, were you scared? I know some men tell me, man, I was scared, I was shook. I didn't know what was going to happen. Like, what was going to come next? Like, what was that process for you as a young man getting ready to embark on that journey of fatherhood?
Well, I always wanted to be a dad, and I think that makes the difference. Some people bump into it. Oops, I'm having a child.
Literally, yeah.
And then they kind of grow into the position. I always wanted to be a dad, and so I took it very seriously. Back in the day when my first daughter was born in 1982, we didn't have all the stuff to kind of figure out if it's a girl or boy. So I didn't know if it was going to be a girl or boy till she was born. But I have one, and this is when you had deliveries in actually an operating room. Mm-hmm. And what they would do is you'd be on the operating table, and then they had a mirror so that you could, you look in the mirror and you can see, in where the doctor was working. And I remember when, you see the head coming out, I got a little queasy. I said, Doc, I think I'm going to pass out. And he said, well, Mr. Ross, just find a little nice soft place on that concrete because when you work with it. So I always wanted to be a dad. And so Charlene, my oldest, who's a registered nurse, has a master's degree in nursing also. Anyway, I just remember when they put her in my arms and they said you could walk her up to the next floor where they'll do the tests and all that and give the, injections and all the vaccination, whatever they needed to do. And I remember just walking down the hall and said, this is my baby. And I was walking down the hall with her in my hand. And so I always wanted to be, and I have to say that most of my girls probably will admit this, but they're spoiled. Now that doesn't mean I didn't, enact any discipline necessary,
Hmm.
but I loved on my daughters, and I think that's the best thing that that a dad can do is love on their daughters and make sure that you're helping them grow to be the person that they should be. And so I always gave them that freedom. And my oldest daughter, she's the only one of my daughters that is married, and her husband said, "Yeah, she's still a daddy's girl." Let me give you a story that told me things had shifted in terms of the dynamic. So I was on the phone on a conference call with all my daughters. We were talking, and I was laying down on the couch and we just shooting the breeze.
Hmm.
And then I sat up. And when I sat up, a pain went through my neck. I said, "Ow." And my daughter said, "Daddy, what's wrong?" I said, "A pain went through my neck." She said, "I'll be right there." I'm like, "Yeah, right." She pulled up and took me to the emergency room, sat with me for like 4 hours, and took me to the pharmacist. I couldn't say no.
Right.
And so I got some muscle relaxer, whatever, whatever. My
Hmm.
point was that it was that point, and that was maybe 10, 15 years ago, maybe even longer, about 15 years ago.
Hmm.
And so that dynamic shifted, in terms of who's caring for who. She was RN and all that kind of stuff. And so uh, that's when I realized that, yeah, okay, they're going to be taking care of me, because I have, that connection with them. That as I get older, that I'm sure my oldest daughter is going to be one come visiting me when I'm walking around in a walker or something. How you doing, Dad? She's the one going to check on me. And people say, well, all my daughters are in the medical field. My oldest a pharmacist. My second oldest, who I mentioned to you, had passed away about 5 years ago in a car accident. She
Hmm.
was an occupational therapist, and then the third oldest is a pharmacist. So I figured I have somebody to kind of look out for me, as far
Hmm.
as nursing, make sure the doctor's giving me the right medication. And then if my other daughter had lived, she's an occupational therapist, make sure that if anything need to be, any rehabilitation I needed for whatever. And then my third oldest would give me all my drugs. So, but yeah, I wanted to be a dad. And I don't know if that's the
Hmm.
prevalent, interest these days with so many people into themselves that, do you really want to be a dad? And so I purposed to want to be a dad. And I really wanted about 5 kids,
Almost.
got close,
Okay.
got 4.
Yeah, got four. Yeah. So, well, one, again, my condolences, on the passing, of your daughter.
Thank you.
I couldn't imagine, just what that feels like. But speaking of that, like as a man, right? How did you process that grief? And of course, grief is ever processing. Like you're always processing that. It looks different from year to year. The only thing I have close to that is that my dad passed, 7 years ago, and the grief is different from year one to year now, but it's still there, right? But as a man, like how did you process that?
Well, to be honest, I'm still processing it. I'm
Yeah,
still grieving.
yeah.
Um, the thing that is there's a difference between say, well, first of all, I'm glad that I have had no one say, "I know how you feel." There's only 2 people I know of that can say that, and I'll tell you why.
Mm,
That people haven't said, "I know how you feel," and I really fortunate because they don't know if they've never been through it. It's a whole different experience. I've lost a mother. I've lost a father. It's a different type of grieving, and from talking to counselors and other people who've been through this, you never get over it, and every day I cry just a little bit because she's my second oldest. She's the one child that probably I taught something for a very long period of time. And I mentioned in the pre-interview, I was her basketball coach for 4 years.
hmm.
And so none of my other daughters could claim that I coached them in anything for that period of time.
Right.
So it's a different process. I don't know. I just get up every day and just put one foot in front of the other and keep moving forward. And
Mm,
things remind me of her every day. Every day when I used to go to work, I would pass by the spot where she had the accident. I
Mm-hmm.
passed by the cemetery. In my office, if you look around, if I can show you, I have pictures of her, as long as my other daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And so every day I'm constantly reminded of her and my mother and my father, so it stays with you. But it helped me. And one of the reasons I got out of teaching, I was talking with a friend the other day about this, is that it's hard to teach kids, and that they need a parent transplant, basically.
Right.
And it's almost like watching a train wreck, that based on what you see, that if it continues like that, where they'll end up. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
hard thing to do, because you want to go to the parents and shake them and say, you have this life that you're breathing into in terms of the things you do, and you're
Mm-hmm.
just squandering it. And then you're going to have another one. You can't even take care of this one. But, so to answer your point, it gives me purpose and direction. I
Mm-hmm.
know that my daughter, if she was alive, said she would be right in this business with me,
Mm-hmm.
because she was trying to be an entrepreneur as well. She had a thing, a phrase called the Ross Empire, you know.
That's
So
nice.
she would be right there. She was my ride or die. She would, just come around, and, like I said, I coached her in basketball. She eventually won a championship in Georgia with Stevenson High School here in Atlanta. And
Mm-hmm.
and I was glad to have her be a part of that, in terms of, once again, letting her explore her interests. And
Right.
so, but you never get over the grieving. And
Yeah.
as I mentioned, there were two people that could say, I understand. And my project was very much, my buildings in the projects were very diverse. We had folks from the Caribbean, folks from Hispanic, Jews, Italians, and so forth. But there were two people. One was a white girl. She was Irish. And another one was Hispanic. And both of us lost our daughters tragically. One
Wow.
in a car accident. The other one, she had lupus. And so they're the only two who could say to me, I
Mm-hmm.
understand what you're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
because they've lost a child, and as an adult, not as a little baby, but as an adult. And
Right.
that's a harder thing when you look at all the potential that could have been.
Right.
So I haven't figured out God's purpose for that. I really haven't, but
Mm-hmm.
I probably never will, but
Right.
I just try to, do the best I can every day, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's tough sometimes. Some days better than others, but you grieve every day. But it gives me impetus to say, don't waste a moment, because you don't know when your time is going to come up. You really don't.
Very true. And
That's very important. I
and
saw a quote from who was it? Oh, Chris Hemsworth, who plays Thor in
yeah.
Marvel, and he was talking about Jeremy Renner, who was in that very tragic snowplow
Yes.
accident. And he said he's 40 years old, and he said, that situation made me think about that. You don't know how much time you have left. And that's the thing that drives me. You don't know. And so you try to make the most of it every day, try to enjoy it as much
Mm-hmm.
as you can, and do the things you like doing during that time.
Right.
You just never know if today's going to be the last day, and do the best you can to love on the people who are around you, who love you, and you love them, to try to stay in touch with them, and take communicative with those individuals, whether it's family or relatives or folks you just met. So,
Right. And I appreciate you answering that question, just because I know as a man, with a wife and with other daughters, it's a loss for the whole family. So I know as a man, it's like your job is to, protect them, their feelings, right? And sometimes that includes, sometimes ignoring your own and just being there
right.
for everybody else, and making sure that they're okay, and that they're grieving, and that they have everything that they need during that process, right? So I definitely just wanted to see just how you were doing and just how you're processing these things too, because that's super important too. And I wanted to the reason why I'm also doing this show specifically is because I wanted to highlight men like you, fathers like you, who love being a father, who are active in their children's lives. And I know the stigma that's out there on fathers and black men and things like that. And but I know from me personally, I know lots of good black fathers. I know lots of good men. I came from one who's very active and present. And Father's Day, is this month, and Definitely wanted to highlight, fathers like you and honor men like you who are doing and have done an amazing job raising children. So one, thank you for raising some good children, and being present and active, in their lives, because that's something that's super important and that's irreplaceable. You can have all the accolades in the world, but if you're not a good, if you're not taking care of your kids, if you have them, then what's the point? So definitely just want to say, from one man to another, thank you, because that's super important.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course. So, how old is your youngest?
How old is my? She's 9.
9.
Yeah, I'm going to the 4th grade.
So, question is both about your oldest, right? What's the difference between raising your 9-year-old now and your oldest? Like, I assume, it's so different now. Well, I feel it's so different because I have friends that have children, and how they're raising them now is completely different, right, from how they were raised. Because everything is different. School is different. What was allowed 30, 40 years ago is not allowed right now. Social media, everything is different, right? So, like, what's that process? Like, what was that process like for you? Not 10 years ago, when now, you're like, oh, wait, I'm having another daughter. Like, it's different.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is devices, cell phones, tablets, computers. When I was raising my daughters in the 80s and the 90s, that was prevalent. The biggest thing they had then was they had, remember the beepers?
Yes.
Beepers. And then you had video games. And so, since having girls, more boys are into video games than, girls.
Right.
And so my daughter, Charmaine, the one who passed away, we would play video games, mostly sports oriented, like, i.e. basketball games. And I stopped playing with her when she started beating me. Because she would take it to a whole nother level. She learned the cheat codes and all this kind of stuff. Yep. And I'm like, you know what? It's not that serious. I'm doing it for fun. But she was doing it to beat her dad.
Yeah.
But she never could beat me on the court. See? Well, taller than her. So I could just post her up and,
Yeah.
But so that's been the biggest difference. And school is different. There was a time where, I'm old school. You couldn't talk back to a teacher. Man, please. You better sit down and be quiet, raise your hand to ask a question, and now you hear these stories about kids just going wild, man, beating up. Man, if you beat up a teacher, you expelled, goodbye. Because who wants to go in a classroom where you've had a fight with a student? How are you going to teach that student? You're human, okay? And how do you expect for teachers to respond when you have students being disrespectful? I mean, you're asking them to do something that is out of character to humans. Someone that has been antagonistic towards you, and now you have to help them learn something? Come on, man. Where they do that at? Okay, so that's the difference, is devices and the discipline that's required to do the work. To be able to, function in society. It's just you just can't be disrespectful. I tell them all the time, I said, you know what? I said, you're going to need teachers to help you in your life. And I'll give you an example. You're going to college, who are you going to get to write a recommendation for you? If you're ticking off every teacher and you come in here with attitude, why would I write a recommendation for you? I ain't doing it.
Right.
I'm not going to put my reputation on the line. So, oh yeah, they'll be a great addition to University of Georgia, knowing darn well that you're a pain in the butt, well academically challenged, all of this stuff. So, so I think the difference is the devices, the discipline. Now, my daughter, even though she's 9, had no problems. The teacher says she's well behaved, great student, and that's because of her upbringing, and what we expect out of her. So I think the expectation, if, I've had situations where I call parents and, they're not surprised that their child is doing what they're doing. I said, so, are you going to give them any consequences? I mean, the last school I was at, I never had a parent reach out to me and say, how's my child doing? You know what I mean? The contact, But if I, and I would reach out to them on a monthly basis to see how things are going and let them know what's happening. But they were not surprised by any of the things I told them, good or bad, because
Wow.
parents know their child. That's
True.
one thing I can say. Parents, if you've done your job right, then you know your child. There's nothing anybody can tell you that you don't already know about your child. The one little area that might be a challenge if they've never taught their child anything. And by that I mean, did you ever show your child how to sweep a floor, wash dishes,
Hmm.
wash clothes? That's where you learn how a child assimilates information and then,
Yep.
regurgitates it to show you that they understood how to wash their clothes.
Right.
You might mess up the first time or two, so you have to be ready for that.
Right.
Okay. But the point is to keep it. So those are the things that I think about is that it's a difference as devices and the discipline and the focus on education. A lot of parents are not focused. Let me just say this for the at-risk kids that I deal with, a
Right.
lot of parents would say they're focused, but they're not really. If you got 3 or 4 kids, man, you need having one child is community school. Having two kids is bachelor.
Hmm.
Having 3 or 4 kids is graduate level stuff. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
I mean, think about it. You got 3 different kids with 2 or 3 years
Hmm.
between each one, different interests. One of the challenges is having an older child and a younger child. Even with my daughters, there's between my oldest child and my second child, there's 8 years, and then between my oldest and my third is 10 years. And
Hmm.
just finding things for them to do that they both could do. So, for example, I took the family to Jamaica, and so I knew that my oldest child, she was 16 at the time, so I knew she would not have a lot in common with an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Right.
So I allowed her to bring one of her 16-year-old girlfriends with us. Had a great time, and I'm still in
Makes
touch
sense.
with her, and my daughters are still in touch with her, and it's good to see these young ladies grow up to be young women.
Right.
So I know that's a long answer to a short question, but
Nah.
the key is that is you have to find things for them to do.
Right.
But it's different. It's a difference now, and I think parents have to limit the time they spend on these devices.
Mm.
Have to set boundaries. How much time to watch television, devices, read, all that stuff. Because when kids get home from school at 3 or 4 o'clock, you got 5 or 6 hours.
Yep.
How are they going to spend that time? Now, we used to spend it outside. These kids are not
Yep.
outside kids. They're inside kids. They ain't going
Yep.
outside playing, changing into their, you know, street clothes. So they could go out from having their school clothes were different from their street clothes.
Yep.
And you don't have that anymore. My kids, when they were growing up, we lived on a cul-de-sac, so they could go outside, and I encourage that, depending on the weather. Put their bicycles out there, the basketball court, whatever,
Oh,
and the other kids in the neighborhood
to
would
the
come.
best days.
Those
Oh,
days are gone. Yeah, we used to play outside. It was considered punishment if you had to stay inside.
exactly. You, I used to play from basketball from sun up to sundown on the weekends.
Yeah, those things are gone. Kids don't play outside. I remember, like for example, we had 15 minutes of recess every day at school.
Mm,
But one day we go out there, it's 80 degrees. It's hot. Can we go back inside? I said, well, you can go
crazy.
stand in the shade. I mean, these kids just don't know. It's too hot out here. I said, well, we go inside, we're going to do work. You know,
Right.
out here, recess is recess. This is play. We get inside, we're not playing.
Exactly.
So we had mostly girls would say that, but some guys too. They're not
Hmm.
used to going outside, playing basketball, playing flag football or stickball or whatever. We created games, Skillsy, all these things. We created stuff where we didn't
Mm,
have any toys. We created games from the stuff that was around us. So,
right.
but these kids are a little different. They're built
Very
a little,
different.
yeah,
And you mentioned discipline. So speaking to some of my friends that have kids, back in the day, spankings weren't so bad. Like it, I got them. I mean, my brother got them. All my friends got spanked. Like it was what it was. When you did certain things, right? And we knew not to go to school and start yapping our mouths about certain things, right? Now these new generation of kids, a lot of them, they're very talkative, right? And sometimes they'll go into school and be like, "Oh yeah, my mom spanked me or my dad beat me or whatever." So and then now you're brought into the office. And it's a thing now. Like now, the teachers want to investigate, what's going on, right? That's a difference also in discipline. And I'm not saying you got to beat the kids 24/7, but what I am saying is that we got spankings and stuff like that, but we didn't go to school. A lot of us didn't go to school and just volunteer the information. I feel like a lot of kids are more vocal and they just say things, and not on purpose, but they just say things, especially when they're younger, right? Like, do you see that playing a part too? And just kind of being like the new generation, and like parents have to be very careful about what they do and what they say, because if they're in school and the kids say something to a teacher, now the parents are being brought in on, hey, so your son or daughter said this. It's like, oh.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that, because there was a period of time when my daughters, would say, I'm going to call defects. I said, here's a number, call them.
Yeah,
I said,
exactly.
you know what? I said, I'll give you a week in a foster home and you'll be begging to come back. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But see, my form of discipline, I wasn't one of those that, hold your hand, whip you, keep whipping you. I would tell my daughters if there was an infraction that necessitated some physical, punishment, I'd say, okay, go upstairs in your bedroom, lay face down on the bed, and pull your pants down. I'll be up. And I'd wait 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes they had to wait was the most excruciating. They were crying before I even got up there, and I didn't even touch them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part of the punishment. Then I would, depending on whatever they did, you'll get either 1 or 2 or 3 lashes. And after I did that, I never did it with my open hand. I always did it with a belt. Mm-hmm. And after that, they'd be crying, ooh, and I would give them a hug. I said, well, Daddy still loves you, but you broke one of the rules, right? So you understand that there's always consequences. And then there's other consequences that demanded that they, had to stay in their room, no TV, none of that, that kind of stuff. And I think parents these days haven't learned those different things that they could do to discipline a child. Now, if you get a child that no matter what you do, they're still going to do it, then that's a whole nother level. Then you need counseling.
Yeah.
Then you need to get some therapy where, you say, hey, don't do this. And they keep doing like, let me give you an example. Let's say they keep sneaking out of the house after everybody goes to bed. Well, that's a whole next level kind of stuff, right?
Right.
So, and after you put down your consequence for that infraction, and if it doesn't work after 2 or 3 times, then you need to probably get some counseling. Hey, what's going on here? And a lot of parents are not willing to do that because children have to fear somebody.
Right.
Okay. When I say fear, that means they have a respect. That means that they've got to have somebody that they know that is going to put the hammer down, that they can't get away with stuff. They have to have somebody that they feared. It should be their mother and their father.
Mm-hmm.
Just hopefully it's them or grandparents or whatever, but they need to fear somebody.
Right.
If you're spiritual, Bible talks of spare the rod,
Sport a child.
Mm-hmm. And so, but I'm not for parents that whip child, for 10 minutes. Okay. Mm-hmm. To me, that's abuse.
Right.
But then you have this whole European idea of talking to kids. Let me tell you something. In my last school, I had 48 graders. I'm sorry, 48 9, 10 year olds in 4th grade. I see all different kinds of personalities, right? And so you have to be able to determine what's the most appropriate thing to do with that child. And you see different levels of the discipline that they have not gotten, because if they got it, they wouldn't be talking back to you.
Right.
There's no reason. If I say sit down, don't say I'm gonna. Just sit your down. But why are you responding? Because they've learned that from home. And right. I guarantee you, I hope that they don't do that at home. If their mom says or dad says, take the trash out, okay, I will later. No, you better do it now. I said do it now. I didn't say do it later.
Right.
And you have to respect them. And let me give you an example why that's important. If I tell you to do something, going back to the whole thing about if I say do something, do it. I was in New York with my daughters, and the subway, we were coming down the subway, and our train was there, but it was getting ready to leave, right? And so we run down the steps. My second oldest Charmaine, the one who passed away, jumps into the car. The doors get ready to close. I look at her and say, jump out. Now, if she's one of those ones that say, why? The doors would have closed, gone.
Oh.
8 years old, you're in New York City, next stop, I'm panicking. So she jumped out. You see what I'm saying? Because she listened to what I said. She didn't try to debate it. She did what I asked her to do. And that's what you need, children, when you be able to tell them to do something, they do it. Not because, you have to give an explanation, because I said so. Right. And one of my favorite refrains from my students, I said, well, Kanisha, I want you to move your seat over here. Why? And my classic refrain was, because I said so. I don't need to give you an explanation. Matter of fact, if I gave you one, you wouldn't even understand why I'm doing it. And maybe I don't want to tell you, but do what I ask you to do because I have a reason.
Right.
But they must be used for asking that from their parents. If their parents say, take the trash out, why? Boom, hey, take it out. I don't want to have that debate, because some things you can't explain to kids at that age. They wouldn't understand. Just do what I ask you to do. And so, yeah, I think discipline and raising kids now so it's a big difference. It's a big challenge. Yeah.
Big difference. So what would...
But let me finish my other point. So in the terms of this European thing of talking, come on, man, you're a man. If you hear your parents, see, there's a difference between hearing and listening. Mm-hmm. If you're watching TV and your mom comes in and says, okay, take the trash out, you hear it.
Yep.
But you're not listening. Because if you were listening, you would do what they ask you to do, right?
Right.
And so a lot of times they think that parents think they could talk to them. No, you can't talk to them, especially boys. Girls are a little different. But boys, you got to say, do this, that's it.
Yep.
And you can't talk to them. Well, Johnny, please do it. No, take trash out. I ain't going back and forth with you. You see? And I think that's what parents try to do, because they think that how they were raised was wrong. I said, well, it means you are. Okay. Right. Well, I don't like getting whoopings. And I said, well, but you still have to give them a consequence for violating rules of the house or your rules or whatever they might be. Right. And they should know what those rules are. Okay. So you have to give a consequence. So whatever method you use, and that's where you have to know your child. Sometimes you can withhold a privilege from them and they'll get it. Other times, for other child, it won't work. So you can't really sometimes treat each child the same. So another child doesn't need a whooping. You just have to say, I'm going to take this privilege away, something that you wanted to do or whatever, and then they'll fall in line. Others, you may have to get more aggressive with based on your experience with that child.
Right. And I appreciate that insight too, because it's, the parenting now, it seems to be a lot more complicated. It seems to be a lot more complicated now than it was back in the day. But like you said, knowing your child's personality, sometimes the whoopings might not work for them, but taking away, their PS5 or whatever that is for them is worse than a whooping. It's like, you know what? I'll take the whooping. Just don't take my PS5, so it's like you think you're hurting him, but he's like, man, look, I take this one time PS5, I take the whooping, and then as long as they don't take that thing from me, so that's perfect. Is knowing your kid's personality. That's super insightful. So when it comes to the fatherhood in general, what would you say was your most challenging? Is the most challenging, or was your most challenging part of fatherhood?
The work-life balance. And, when I'm doing my 90, one of the reasons that I did decide to retire was because I wanted to be there for my daughter, my youngest daughter. But I think one of the biggest challenges is that work-life balance is, I did things that you're not supposed to do when you're raising kids. I started a business. I started my business in, 86, 84, something like that. My daughter was 4 or 5 years old. And then my other daughters, I didn't quit my job until 88, but I still had little part-time jobs for about 3 years until my business got off the ground. I was a producer for what is Georgia Public Television, a PBS station.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote and things like that. But my second and third daughter were born in 90 and 92. And I opened up my office in 91. And so I spent a lot of time in the office traveling on business and things like that. So I think the work-life balance is the biggest key, because if you got a 9 to 5, you come home, I mean, you worked all day. You might be tired, but now you have to pour into your children, whether it's homework, extracurricular activities, whatever. And so, at the time I was married, so it was important that my kids, we had to tag team them. I said, you drop them off, I'll pick them up, that kind of thing. Who's going to decide about dinner, that kind of thing. So I think the biggest challenge is that work-life balance, trying to make sure you have enough time for kids. And even now, I wish I would have, I spent a lot, I did a lot with my daughter. I was at every cheerleading, competition, at every football game and basketball games. My daughter cheered. I had 2 daughters that were cheerleaders. I was at every basketball game that my daughter was in. If I wasn't there, it had to be a really big deal.
Right.
And they understood that. So I think the work-life balance is the most important thing. When you have kids, your life is not your own.
Right.
Your life is to raise this person, all right, to be a contributing member of society. And that's an awesome responsibility. And I, to be honest with you, man, I don't think a lot of people take that seriously. You have a child, the hard work that it requires every day. You have to think 2 or 3 steps ahead of them, man.
Right.
Get home, my daughters would come running to me, daddy, and I had to give them that time. And, having, daughters, you had to give them each a certain amount of time, by themselves. That's the key thing. You have to find something that you could connect on that will allow you to have some quality time with them. Because at the end of the day, that's what kids are going to remember. They're not going to remember that you got them the newest, iPhone or Barbie doll or whatever. They're going to remember the time you spent with them. They're going to remember the time you spent with them. I'll give you an example. When my second oldest daughter, Charmaine, passed away, and I, as an AME minister, I eulogized her.
Oof.
And I remember and that was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. And when I finished, my daughters came up to me and they were crying. They said, Dad, we're so glad that you made us take, because every year, once they got out of high school, we would take pictures together. It was me and my daughters. And whenever, because they were all in college at 7 different times, and when they were all in town together at any time, we would have dinner and stuff like that. And sometimes I had to force them. I had like, hey, listen, okay, you're coming to dinner. You know what I mean? I had to lay the hammer down. And they were so thankful that I did that, because it created so many memories that they can now tell. My oldest daughter, she's recounting about, she has a different version of how she grew up. And my current wife, Felicia, laughs because one of her sisters has a different version of events. I was a slave driver. You did that. I said, I'd be shaking my head like, really? They have this alternate version of what happened. But then I have to think about when I was growing up, one of my closest memories is that I worked in the business. Every Saturday, my dad would get me up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'd go work in the business for 12 hours from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I couldn't say no. I had to go. And all of us spent time doing that. So I think those are the things that it's important to create those memories with your kids, because that's the thing. That's the stuff they're going to remember when they get older. They're going to remember the time, the vacations, the time you spent with them, the things you did, the funny things that happened. They'll recount all those things. The time that Dad came to one of their functions and mismatched socks or whatever, or mismatched shirt and dress, and pants, whatever. And they'll laugh at it now, but they're probably embarrassed then, So, but creating memories, I think that's what it's all about, because that's in the end, that's what they're going to remember, the memories, and take lots of pictures.
Yeah.
because you always go back. See, I was at your football game.
Yep. I was
I
here.
was here. I took you there. We did this. We went to this. We went to. We was on vacation. You can show them the receipts, and
Hmm.
and that's always very helpful because their memory will fade, even though
Right.
young they'll forget.
Yep. And you go, oh wait, that happened. Like, yes,
Yeah, it
it did.
did.
And the pictures is so right because my mom was a big proponent of pictures. And sometimes she would force the pictures upon us. Especially with the guys, the guys macho, ego,
Right.
she has sons. So two boys and my dad. So like we all taking these photos and they look like jail pictures. We all just sitting here like, like we're not trying to get too close, like we're not trying to get too close. Like we don't know how to pose with each other like back in the day. And it was just funny. But it would happen religiously. And now looking back on it, like you lose your dad, look, right there. I got
Right.
pictures, and those memories are always there. I can go back to photo albums. I can go back to things and go, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
yep. And so like I can completely agree from a kid's perspective. As an adult now, I love looking back on pictures and I love
Mm-hmm.
looking back on those memories. It's it's priceless.
Oh yeah, remember I'm a big picture. I have over 20,000 pictures on my phone, and
Wow.
and they're memories, because
Hmm.
it transports me back to when that picture was taken. If I can remember what was going on, sometimes
Yep.
I can, sometimes I can't, you know. But the pictures, I always say, take lots of pictures, take lots of pictures.
Yes, 100%. And also from a kid's perspective, when you see your parents get older, um, it's it's also good because you get to see or remember your parents in a different light.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something also because when you start to see that like life going in reverse,
Right.
almost like now it's like you said, like we're taking care of our parents, and you're starting to see them in, I would say, a weaker state, right? If they're sickly or whatever the other case is, and you're starting to experience those things, and that's for a kid or for a younger kid, that's a hard thing to see because these are your superheroes. Like these guys don't get sick, right? They don't. Even they do, but it's like for you, it's like it just doesn't compute. And when you start to see them be lesser of themselves, you have those memories and you have those pictures and you have those everything. Like for me, I remember saving voice notes of, I have voice notes of my mom, just she's still alive, but I have like if she left me a voicemail, I save it. I've saved those things, because it matters. Because one day, like you just never know, like you said, you just never know how life takes a turn, right? And so that's kind of how, it kind of helps me out too, because at a point now, and we're gonna get back to you in just two seconds, but my mom, she had 2 strokes last year,
Oh wow.
so and so she had to have 2 brain surgeries, and this would be the third brain surgery that she's had because 10 years ago she had a brain aneurysm.
Oh,
So
she's a
now,
survivor, man. She's a survivor. Wow.
yeah, yeah. And so now with these 2 strokes, like, she's been through a lot of her life. She's a breast cancer survivor, as well. My dad passed, and that was a grief-stricken thing for her. So now to having 2 strokes last year, now she's bedridden. She has cognitive, just kind of disabilities and things like that. So like her picking up the phone and calling me is not an option anymore. Because she's bedridden, one side of her body she can't move. And sometimes, well, I still get to speak to her and visit with her and
Right.
things like that. But somebody has to be there for that to happen. She can't pick up the phone anymore like she did just last year to call, and say, "Hi, son, how you doing?" That's not an option. So that transition went pretty fast, right? And so me still having, I say that to say me still having those pictures, you know, those voicemails, those, however many I saved, that means a lot to me. Those memories, like you say, means a lot because, now, even though she's not the same, I still have all of those memories and still have those voice notes and things like that, and kind of adjusting to a new normal for our family, right? So you're absolutely right with that. So definitely, if you listen, take those pictures with your family, save those voicemails,
All of
just
those. Yep.
everything that you can, because you just never know when life takes a turn.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those are the things that become important. The pictures and the memories, all those things that you have, you can relive those over and over again. And
Mm-hmm.
that's important. With my 9-year-old, we have in our kitchen, we have this display, and I'm sure you've heard about it, where you can send pictures to it, and it shows them on a rotating basis. It just
Yeah.
shows. And so she's 9. She'll see pictures when she was like 2 and 3, and she doesn't remember being in that situation. But
Mm-hmm.
it reinforces that you was in that situation. You know what I mean? We were together. We were doing this, skating, or we were reading, or we were at a zoo, or at a festival, or a carnival, or whatever, or we were visiting relatives. It reminds her is that I was there,
Mm-hmm.
and she'll have these memories all her life, for the rest of her life. So when I'm gone, because eventually I'm not going to be here, then sometimes having the pictures is all the memories that you have. It transports you back and helps you fill in the blanks about, oh yeah, I remember when we did that. And sometimes you'll forget, oh, I forgot we did that. You know what I mean? So I
Right.
think those are very important. Having those picture memories, I tell parents, young parents, they take a lot of pictures. I said they'll
Yes.
get tired of you taking pictures, and take video,
Mm-hmm.
okay, as much as you can. And now, excuse me, you don't have any excuse because it's on your phone. Back in the day, in the 70s, we didn't have that. You had to go
Yep.
get a Polaroid or something like that. It was a big deal to take a
Yep.
picture in the 70s and 80s. Now
Mm-hmm.
it's at your fingertips. It doesn't
Yeah.
cost you anything. It's boom, you got it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, creating those memories, those pictures are so important, as you're doing, and because you're, like I said, eventually, those are the memories that you'll have. All you'll have is those pictures and those voice notes
Mm-hmm.
and those videos that you now are looking at while the person is still here.
Right. And like you said, exact same thing, but in reverse. Last Christmas, my girlfriend got my mom the virtual photo frame,
Okay.
and I put a SD card full of pictures from her life, because since she had the stroke, I wanted her to remember certain things
Right.
because she has short term memory issues now, but her long term memory is pretty good. So I want to see. So I put a bunch of pictures on from like family and friends, and then you start to see like eyes like, oh, I start to see like she's like, oh, I remember that, I remember this, and I'm like, yes, like I was so glad I had those pictures to all of them to upload for her, and she loved it. And every time I would visit, she said, no, thank you for putting those pictures, and because she remembered those things, and those things brought her joy even in her own state. So these things matter. And sometimes as we're moving through life, we don't really realize, and we're just moving and grooving. Sometimes we got to stop and just say, oh, take those
Mm-hmm.
pictures.
Sometimes you got
It
to
takes two
stop
seconds.
and smell the roses, so to speak, as they say. But it's very important. Yeah. So I enjoy, pictures. I'm an amateur sports photographer, and uh,
Nice.
and so I like to take sports. That's how I got into taking pictures. I always enjoyed photography, but when my daughter started getting involved in events, I started taking pictures. My daughter playing basketball, my daughter's cheering, and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of my little private bucket lists, is to be on the sidelines at an NFL or NBA game and be a photographer, for Sports
Mm-hmm.
Illustrated or something. That'd be kind of cool.
If anybody's
Working on
gonna do it, it's you.
I'm working on it.
So speaking of, you published two books.
Yeah.
Now, question with these two books: are they still available now,
Yes.
or yes,
On Amazon.
on
Absolutely.
Amazon?
Yep.
Perfect. So they're all on finance. So talk to me about your common sense guide to personal finance planning. Why did you write that book? Yeah, why did you decide to even write that book?
Well, the book grew out of a compilation of all my radio scripts from my syndicated radio show. My show was not a long form show; it was 2 minutes. It was a minute of editorial and a minute of commercial.
Hmm.
And at its heyday, we were on about 100 stations around the country, in about every major market, reaching like 5 million people every week. And so that's where it came from. I took all my scripts and condensed them down, edited them. Um, my publisher saw fit to publish them. And I first self-published it.
Mm.
Okay. And I handed that over to my publisher. And it's really interesting how that book came about. When I had my company, I had like 3 or 4 employees, and one of my employees was VP of marketing. And he was in Nashville, Tennessee, and he had a copy of my manuscript. And I told him, I said, hey, when you go by, Thomas Nelson books, drop off the manuscript. So he literally was in the lobby, he said, and handed the script. Somebody came down and took it. Next thing I know, a couple of months later, I get a call from Victor Oliver, who was the president of Oliver Nelson Books, which is an imprint of Thomas Nelson Books. Anyway, he said, I'd like to meet with you about this book. So I go to meet with him. He lived in Atlanta. And one of the first questions I asked him, I said, why do you want to publish my book? And he looked at me and he said, well, Thomas Nelson is a Christian books publisher, if you know anything about them.
Mm.
Their biggest claim to fame is that they have the biggest, marketing in secular bookstores, not just Christian bookstores.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, we have one requirement of our authors is, number one, they be Christian. And number two is that they live what they write about. And we've checked you out. And that is true. And that's the only reason we want to publish a book.
Wow.
And the rest is history. Then the second book, about 2 or 3 years, that book was in 91, 92. The other one was published in 90. So about 3 years later, they came to me and said, well, okay, what are you doing? Do you have any more books to write? I said, I pretty much shot everything in that first book. And he said, well, what are you doing now? I said, well, I started this nonprofit called Christian Financial Ministries, and I've been doing these seminars at churches focused around my first book, but putting a Christian perspective on it, chapter and verse, that kind of thing. He said, well, can I see the information? I said, yeah, here you go. He read it and said, this is another book. I said, really? Yeah. I said, okay. And it gave me 6 months to write it. And of course, I waited to the last month and ended up renting a cabin for a week in north part of Georgia called Helen, Georgia, and wrote that book in 7 days.
Wow.
All I did was eat, write, sleep, and poop. That's it. That's all I did for 7 days. And that book that's how that book came together. Because at the time, this was in 95, 96, 97, somewhere around there. And had my radio show. I was writing every day. I had the newspaper. I was a deal floor. I had all this stuff coming to me. It was hard to take out the time to write. And one of the challenges with writers is that you have to have the discipline to write. And one of the things I can do is, I can write. And I can write under pressure, to give you an example, my dissertation, I wrote that in 6 months. After I finished all my coursework, then I had to do my research, and I did it in 6 months. And they said, that's pretty unheard of. People normally take a couple of years. I said, well, I every day I would sit down at my computer, and whether one word came out or 1,000 words, I would write for 3 or 4 hours. And that's what a lot of folks don't understand about writing. Writing is a very lonely thing. I see why a lot of writers were alcoholics because it's just you and the computer, with your thoughts all the time, right? And I'm more of a nonfiction versus a fiction writer. I don't think I've ever written anything fiction, but and so you do a lot of research, and so it's just a lonely thing. Now these big name authors have people writing for them. I mean, they may write some of it, but a lot of times they have people who are writing with them, and then everybody needs an editor, and that's the most important part. So that's how the book came about. That was in 91, and 91, 92, and so that's how that book came. I didn't have an agent. I didn't, I had an attorney that looked over my contracts, but I didn't have an agent. But now what I'm thinking of doing now is updating those books, and particularly Your Common Sense Guide. As a matter of fact, I'm in the process of doing that now, is updating it, contemporizing it, adding some things that I didn't have in the first book, which is on, entrepreneurship and that kind of thing. So, and I have no time frame for it, just write a little bit, every day. Now I'm taking 2 courses, at Georgia State. So my time is limited, but after July, well, then they have the fall semester too. So, but anyway, I'm gonna find time for it. But I'm not in no hurry to get it done tomorrow.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Well, we know you can get it
I don't
done
know
in
if that
7 days. So I mean, yeah. I mean, we know you can get it done in 7 days. So I mean, it's all right.
That's all I'm
right.
doing. But I'm doing other stuff. Like yesterday, I went out to restock my vending machines, and so that was a 6, 7, 8 hour deal because we got 13 machines, and so that took some time out tomorrow. But today I have a paper that's due by midnight. So I've got to get that done. So, but
I'm gonna get back to the vending machines in 1 second. But before we get there, so I know this book, God's Plan for Your Financial Success. You've also an ordained minister. So what I want to know is, how has your faith played a role in your life?
It plays a big role, and I think one of the things that and is important for us to have some special time with the Lord, or what we call quiet time, have that time. And in the last couple of years, I kind of moved away from that because my time to have my quiet time is normally early in the morning.
Right.
And I get up when I was in teaching. I get up at about 4:30. I leave the house at 5:30. Get to work by 6:30. So it's very challenging to do that. And now I'll be able to get back to that. But my faith has been a very important part because I've always believed I've been led by the Spirit to do certain things. And, it's something that you feel is happening and you have to just go with it. But whatever goals I have, they have to be big enough. I have to leave a little room for God to get in there. Because I can say I'm going to do X, Y, Z. It has to be big enough to frighten me a little bit, to say, you know what? I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to leave the door open for God to do it. If it's what I'm supposed to do, then he'll make sure it gets done. So, and I think now I'm more spiritual than organized religion, if that makes sense.
Right.
That
it does.
And I'm studying other things, like I'm studying the African influence in Christianity, which has been hidden for a long time. The Black influence in the Bible, the Black presence in the Bible. So I'm on a different journey now at this age.
Right.
And you see, when you get over 65, you start doing things to I guess get you into heaven. But I've always lived my life. And this will sound a little corny, as what would God have me to do? Okay. And I think that's what leads me every day. So for example, the 2 businesses that we've created, me and my wife, we know that it's generational wealth because we're leaving it to our kids. See? And so as much as I like doing it now, I know eventually they're going to have to take over it. And I think that's the thing that drives me now. But faith has always been a very big part of my life. It wasn't so when I was growing up. I don't think I went to church. Well, let me put it this way. My parents would send me to church. They didn't go. Send me, of course, I'd play hooky with some of my friends and use the offering money to go buy candy and that kind of stuff. But as I got older in my 20s, that's when I got closer to the Lord. And then became an AME minister and was the executive pastor, as you see it at a church. And so I think that you have to have faith. You have to have a belief. And even if you don't believe in God, that there's some design, there's some design of the universe. You think, because when you start thinking about that, the Big Bang or any of that kind of stuff, you think about, well, to create something from nothing, is that even possible? I mean, you can't get your head around it. I can't get my head around that. So, for example, I'm looking around this room. I didn't create none of this, but this was created out of nothing.
Right.
And that's very hard to grasp. I think people who don't go down that path and say, yeah, okay, in the Big Bang there was certain this, but where did they come from?
Right.
That part is the biggest part to deal with. And some people just bypass and say, oh, yes, I'm a believer by Adam and Eve. And that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to think about the creative design, the design of this universe. To think about your skin. Your skin was created that your blood doesn't soak through your skin and come out.
Right.
I mean, how does that happen?
Right.
There's a scientific reason, but we were created like that.
Right.
And so I think that my evolution and my walk has become a little more spiritual in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
to understand, who I am in this universe, where I fit in, and how I could be a children of God and make sure that this world is a better place than when I leave this place. It'll be a better place than when I started. And I
Right.
focus on my kids and my loved ones. What can I do to help them along their journey? Because as you get older, and you have parents and when you have kids, you become more an advisor to them. Even your siblings, I'm closer to my siblings than I was when I
Mm-hmm.
was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, every year I go back up to New York to visit with them for 3 or 4 days because I don't know how much longer, that I have or they have.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And most of my siblings are in their 60s.
Mm-hmm.
I have an older sibling who's, she just turned 80. She lives in Columbus, Georgia. And then my sister is 75, 76. So I've got older siblings that,
Mm-hmm.
that at some point they're not going to be here. And I want to be able to say, I spent quality time with them. And those
Right.
memories that I'll have of hanging out with them and just shooting the breeze or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if did I answer your question? I thought.
Yes. No, yeah. So, but with the faith, right? And we all know, with through scripture and everything, Christians and, life isn't going to be easy. We know this, right? There's going to be, struggles, mishaps, trials, tribulations, things like that. But do you think, just in life, or has tragedy, a certain level of tragedy affected your faith? And I
Well,
don't just mean, people lose
biggest
jobs and things
my
like that, but I mean
biggest
like tragedy.
challenge to my faith was when my daughter was passed,
Mm.
and sometimes every day I ask God why, because um, she had overcome so many obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember she graduated from University of West Georgia. Well, let's go back to when she was in high school and won a championship, and she had 2 or 3 college offers, and she turned them all down
Wow.
because But I remember all through her high school career, she kept saying, "I'm going to be in the WNBA. I'm going to go get a scholarship." And the reason that she decided not to take any of them because she wanted to just be a college student, and the school that she attended, they always sent at least 3 or 4 girls to Division I women's basketball programs. And they would come back and tell us that your life is not your own. You got to go back on campus during the summer. You can't work. They own you. And she didn't want that. And she turned all that down.
Wow.
It all worked out for her. She graduated from the University of West Georgia with a bachelor's, and then she wanted to be an occupational therapist. Mm-hmm. And she didn't get in the first time. So she had to go and take some additional courses for a year or so and then reapply. And she finally got in. And then she had to do residencies in 2 different locations. And so much she overcame to become, and then she didn't pass the occupational therapy test the first time. And we had to counsel her through that. And she passed it on the second time. And she had a job as an occupational therapist with kids in a school district. And was just happening. They loved her. So much so that when she passed, they dedicated a bench in the school in her memory and put a name on it and all that. Wow. So I say all that how that has changed me, if for no other thing, is that to cherish every moment, to make sure you can stay in touch with the loved ones, and that you're not going to get out of this life alive.
Right. Right.
You're all going to have to pass through that. And so the tragedy, yes, it impacted my life. I loved on my students a lot more. So, for example, I saw a couple of students that loved to draw. So I
Mm-hmm.
bought them some drawing pads and
Awesome.
gave it to them.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know how to react, Terrence. They didn't know how to react. They said thank you, but all I said, well, just every day I want to see your drawings.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they would show me and whatever. But I gave something. Now I don't know what fruit that will bear. I really
Right.
don't care. I just did something that I felt I was led to do. And I think in a life we have to do that. If God puts it on your heart to do it, go ahead and do it. You don't
Right.
know how that's going to manifest itself.
Right.
Uh,
It's true.
and so tragedies can be learning opportunities. You got
Mm-hmm.
to grieve, but at the same time, what lesson are you pulling out of this that you need to apply to your life?
Right.
And I like to think I try to live every day, not as if it's my last, but as if I'm creating a memory that I'll be proud of.
Love
You know,
it.
yeah, and tragedy. And then, if you look at the bookstore, lost $500,000. I mean, I thought I was going to own 2 or 3 bookstores, but that's not what the plan was.
Mm.
And I always ask God why. I was a Christian bookstore. I mean, what could be more important to the kingdom than having folks reading, Christian books?
Right.
Uh, but I learned a lesson in business that you need to have a plan B. And so now I have several businesses: a real estate business, a vending business, and might even start a third one. But I'm growing those two. But I'm going to leave those to our kids. Me and my wife are leaving those to our kids eventually,
Mm.
and so and get them familiar with it. My bonus son came, and we didn't think that we would need him.
Mm-hmm.
But he was restocking our machines for a whole year.
Wow.
In
Wow.
my little mind, I thought I was going to be able to get off of work at 3 or 4 o'clock and then go. I don't know what I was thinking. Okay, but see, that's back to my point, though, Terrence. I had to do it big enough to let God get in it. And guess what?
Mm-hmm.
My bonus son showed up and he did a great job.
Wonderful.
Okay, and he went out twice a week. Probably
Mm-hmm.
we paid him. It wasn't like it was free. And he probably did 20 hours, 15, 20 hours a week doing that. And that
Mm-hmm.
was a burden that was lifted off of me and my wife. And that was something I would not have anticipated,
Mm-hmm.
So that's a whole example of, God getting in the mix, learning from some things in the past. But I thought I could have the energy to do all that. And at 65, I'm like, are you crazy? What's wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
Can't do
And
all that.
and your bonus son, that's from your wife's.
Yes.
So, how was that transition? As far as being a stepfather as well, because we know you're a girl dad,
Right.
for sure. But how was that part with the stepson? Just raising. I don't know if you helped raise, but like being a part of his life. How was that experience for you, being a girl dad?
Well, he's a grown man. I mean, so
Got
he's
it.
got his own kids and stuff. So it's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I think in him being connected with the business in terms of
Mm-hmm.
restocking, it did give us an opportunity to have a dialogue about something. Because if you know about men,
Mm.
men bond over activities, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Women women can just talk.
Yeah.
Men, they go to dinner. Women go to dinner and talk. Men have to be playing basketball, golf, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing an
Mm-hmm.
activity, mowing the grass. They're doing something
Right. Right.
and create that bonding. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that did bond us a little bit because we had something to talk about that was different than just, okay, me being a dad to you. And I like to think that helped him understand me a little bit more, help him
Nice.
understand that you're eventually going to be left with his business. And we had to counsel him do some things as far as
Mm-hmm.
customer service and that kind of stuff,
Right.
but in the end, he did a great job with it. And
Wonderful.
I think it allowed us to, have a little
Bond.
bonding. You
Great.
know, he's a little introverted, so that's a little challenge. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, it gave us something for him to do, some activity for him to do, connected us together to be able to do that. And that
Wonderful.
and that was a blessing. I'm not in the business
Love
of
it.
discipline. He's 38 years old.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
He ain't a little
Awesome.
boy.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Right.
So so
Yeah.
that creates a whole different dynamic. And he
Wonderful.
has kids of his own, and I pour into them. I just bought a book I saw on the internet called Girl Power. It's a coloring book. So I bought 4 of them,
Mm-hmm.
for his girls. And he has all girls. Well, no, he has let's see, three girls. See, one, two girls. I mean, one and 3 sons.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
had to think for a minute.
Yeah.
So, but his sons, I think one is like 19, the other was like 16. And
Hmm.
then his son was just born about 3 months ago.
Wow.
So I'm excited about
Yeah.
pouring into them.
Oh, that's
I'm the
great.
granddad that you come over. I'm gonna feed you ice cream and hot chocolate cake and send you home.
Fun.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
right.
On the sugar high.
And they up to
Thanks.
they on a sugar high until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, right?
Thanks, Dad. Yeah.
But that's what grandparents do, and they see me, man. There was a time when the girls were young, because the girls are like, one is 3, one is like 2.
Hmm.
Okay, and at first when they were born, when they drop off at the house to come out, they'd cry and cry. Oh, I didn't cry. Oh, God. I said, but and eventually, man, they come to the house, granddad. They would call me Pop Pop.
Yeah.
And he come running, give me a hug. Before they couldn't be dropped off because they wanted
Hmm.
mother and they'd be crying. But now
That's
you drop
nice.
them off and it's no big thing. We got toys for them, and I spoil them too. Like we
Hmm.
got somewhere, and I can't remember, we were at a fair or something, and I had these remote control cars, and
Hmm.
they wanted to play with them. I said, you know what? We went to Walmart and I bought each of them one. Okay. It was like $10, $12, the little remote control. And now we go
Hmm.
out, we play the remote control car. There's just something about. And the other thing, and I don't know how this happened, Terrence, I'm a big superheroes guy. Mostly
Yeah.
Marvel and some DC. Right
Hmm.
here, I have like 8. If you can see my hair, I have like 8 to 10 action figures, right? They're not
Nice.
dolls, they're action figures.
Yeah.
And they got, for some reason, Terrence, they got hold of Spider-Man, and
Oh.
Spider-Man is their hero now. I'm like, how did that happen? Well, when they came over the house, they saw Spider-Man. They wanted it
Hmm.
all. And so now they've been indoctrinated into the superhero fraternity or sorority.
As they should.
Yeah, exactly. And when they get older, someone's going to ask them, so you're a girl, how did you get fascinated by Spider-Man and these superheroes? And they have to point to their granddad. They're going to say, hey,
Hmm.
my granddad.
That's
And
amazing.
what else are they going to say? Because they didn't come
True.
up with that themselves. So those are the things that I think about, in terms of, I can't remember the question now. What was the question?
No, the original question was about your stepson.
Oh, yeah, stepson. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
but
Yeah. And so I'm pouring into them,
yeah.
which helps him because, if you
Hmm.
got 2 or 3 kids, you're going to need some help. And so
Yeah, yeah, no,
they
for
know
sure.
that I'm going to be hovering and focusing on academics.
Hmm.
So I bought one of the books I bought also was a bridge book for the 3-year-old is going to be going to pre-K, a pre-K
Hmm.
workbook for the summer to learn their numbers and their colors and all that kind of stuff. So
Wonderful,
I'm that
wonderful.
kind of granddad. I'm the granddad that you're going to have fun with, but also, hey, how you doing in school?
I love it.
That kind of thing.
I love it. Um, so the business. So I know that you have the vending machine business. And how do you go from 1 to 13? Right? I think 1 is good, not good enough, but so it's really good to manage. 1 and build that one. How did you go from 1 to 13, and how long did that take you?
Well, believe it or not, we went all in the first time. We bought 13 at one time.
How'd you
Yep.
get the locations?
In 3 different locations with the same company. This is a company
Oh,
that has warehouses in the same area. If you understand, I don't know in Las Vegas if they have industrial districts
yeah.
with warehouses and
Yep.
manufacture something. So this company has 3 locations within like a mile or 2 of each other. And so we were able to get that contract. It was a business broker, if you want to call it, that brought us in. We met them at a business expo, and they had a unique thing where they find locations and then they sell you the vending machines. And that's how we got in. We got 13 machines. I would advise that for most people,
Right.
but we had the resources to do it,
Right.
and we wanted to scale up quickly, and
Hmm.
and we did it, effort. I won't say effortlessly, but
Mm-hmm.
it took some. I like the art of the deal. Putting the deal together, seeing it
Right.
come to fruition, and making it work. And so yeah, we went in. I would advise people, to buy maybe, it depends on what your goal is. If someone like you is young, I say buy one, and see how that goes. And because you're going to
Mm-hmm.
have to work it, you have to go
Right.
restock it. So if you're working a full time job, you got to kind of get gradually ramp up. You
Mm-hmm.
could buy a machine from anywhere from 6 to 8 grand,
Mm-hmm.
and you're off to the races, and you'll make that money back if it's in a right location in the first year. Then after that, it's just profit.
Right.
So I think that the same thing. We did the same thing with our real estate. We bought one. In that one, we bought one property, and
Mm-hmm.
then a year or two later, we bought three. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because we wanted to scale up.
Right.
Now, mind you, I'm looking at retirement. So these were things that I was ramping up because eventually, these were going to be the businesses I'm going to spend my time in retirement working on and maybe
Right.
scaling up and that kind of thing.
Right.
But if you're young, in your 30s and 40s, do one or two, have a game plan in mind of what you plan to do as far as how this is going to work for you. Um, what's your purpose? Are you doing this for retirement? Are you
Right.
looking to get out of your current job and do this full time?
Mm-hmm.
You got to decide that. Once you decide that, then the next thing is how much income I'm going to need to be able to, quit my job. And that
Right.
tells you the things you need to do that.
Right. Sound advice. Sound advice. Um, and the last thing I think I'm going to ask you, because I've asked you a lot of questions today, so I appreciate you being so patient.
Sure.
But it's been a very informative show here. Husband life. I know you're married to the lovely Mrs. Felicia Ross, right?
Right.
What has being a husband meant to you?
Well, we're partners. We're
Mm,
partners in life. We're partners in business. Um, that's been very, very crucial. I don't think I could do the things I've done without having, Felicia by my side. She
mm.
has co-signed on all my crazy ideas. And I have to believe because she believes I can get it done.
Right.
Because, her job is pretty demanding. She's a controller for an IT company.
Mm,
But you have to date each other at least every week. You have to have time out. And I don't care if you have kids or not, you gotta get a babysitter. You gotta have time to date each other, and that means
mm,
going out, doing even if it's going to the movies or out to dinner, or go walk in the park. But spend time, quality time together. I think
mm-hmm,
that's extremely important. And so, you know, um, we got married 5 years ago,
mm-hmm.
almost 5.5 years ago, and we started our first business the first year we were married.
Nice.
And so we hit the ground running. And, it requires a lot of communication,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of cooperation, sharing of responsibilities and duties and things like that. Um, so it's very important that you communicate, you have goals, to sit down and say, okay, let's see if our life goals are the same. And
Mm-hmm.
so, for example, one of the life goals we had is that, we wanted to quit our jobs, retire eventually at some point, and rent, or more importantly, buy an RV and travel the country.
Love it.
Because if you have these businesses, real estate runs itself. I have a property manager. I don't even see those houses. Okay, I go down maybe once or twice a year, and I just get a check. And with the vending, I can always find somebody to stock them, like my bonus son, or somebody else. I can hire somebody to do that. So that's
Mm-hmm.
something that we're leaning into. We still want to do that. Okay. Um, we bought a new house. The house we were living in was a starter house, so we bought a new one about 2 years ago, and we're
Wow.
still working on it. We got somebody down now painting the bathroom. We installed a new
Mm-hmm.
shower in there and stuff. So you have to have goals and things that are together, things
Mm.
that you can agree upon of what you want to do. And so right now, my focus is on retiring my wife. You know, that's my goal, is to create enough income from our businesses so that she can retire.
Mm.
She works from home and only goes to the office a couple of days a week. So
Mm-hmm.
she's kind of retired, I guess. That's the way I look at it. During COVID, we had to work. We both have separate offices in on a house, and so we both work from home now since I'm retired. And so, but we had a flirtation with that during COVID, and we found we can. She works. She's in the next room. I work and do my stuff. She does her stuff, and you know. But now in retirement, it's going to be different because you have to change her. I'm saying change, but she's just going to be accustomed to having me around, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more. Which I guess was in 6 months to a year. We'll have to get back and see how that's worked out. But we've had a flirtation with it before, so we know that we can work together in the same house doing our own thing, and so that's important. So I enjoy being a husband,
Mm-hmm.
enjoy being a father, um, and I think those are two positions, two responsibilities that I don't think get a lot of attention in this world, because a lot of people out there who are single, raising kids by themselves, who are being parents, but not having that other spouse to help them.
Right.
Because I think the most powerful, I read an article a little, years ago, the most powerful economic unit is a married couple,
Wow.
because you have two incomes, and there's not much you can't do if you agree on something.
Mm.
Even if you talk about scripture, when two come together, there's not anything that they can't accomplish putting God first in the mix.
Mm.
And we just hope that we're a beacon of light for other couples about what's possible. Doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that we don't have our challenges,
Of
but we
course.
are able to overcome them, and to have mutual goals and mutual respect for each other, and building a life together. And that's important. But keep in mind, I'm trying to enjoy every minute, because I don't know how much time I have left.
Mm-hmm.
I think she has the same perspective as well. Trying to make those memories, trying to do that. Being a
Mm.
husband is a great responsibility, um, and requires a lot of cooperation. And folks ain't getting married like they used to anymore.
No.
I don't know why. You know, um,
Mm.
so that's a curiosity. To
I have
me.
a couple ideas, but yeah, I mean.
Yeah. Well, I think I know black women have a real problem finding uh,
Mm-hmm.
good mates. Because you know, there's so many men that are incarcerated, you
Mm-hmm.
know, so many that are in the underground economy, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of women are not going to sign on to that lifestyle. Okay, and so that creates a void. But
Mm-hmm.
these women have kids, and I have a real challenge if you don't have if you're not taking care of your kids, and we don't have a whole lot to talk about.
Right.
So
Right. No, yeah, absolutely right. And I think you said it best. And I think we'll leave it there. You are a lot of things. I mean, you are an educator, you're an entrepreneur, minister. You are a leader, um, father, husband, brother. Right. You got a lot of titles, and you carry them well. You've represented men. You represent men very well, black men very well. Again, just want to, just thank you for everything that you've done for your family, for your students, and just people in general who come into contact with you, and to, be a part of your life. Anything or anyone that you've touched, I know it has been blessed, and has gotten a lot of wisdom and knowledge and understanding. So, I just want to thank you for being an incredible pillar of the community, and also raising incredible children who are great pillars in their community now. And that's all a part of how serious that you're taking fatherhood and manhood and leadership. So, thank you, for that. And you are a shining example to a lot of black men everywhere that has come in contact with you. So thank you. And I definitely appreciate you. And I look forward to possibly having you on the show again. You impart a lot of wisdom. And so I always value that on the show. So I just want to say thank you. And I appreciate you for coming on the show. And please, everybody go pick up his books on Amazon. Your Common Sense Guide to Personal Finance Planning and God's Plan for Your Financial Success. Definitely go pick those up and support Dr. Charles Ross. And I definitely appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, I just want to say just kudos to you for inviting me. I appreciate the invitation. And you have an open invitation to invite me back. I enjoy talking about the things. That's one of the things when you get older, you want to pour into people to combine your experience, with your knowledge, which equates to wisdom. And so I'm telling you what I know and what I've experienced. Now, what I don't know, what I'm theorizing, these are things I've experienced. And I think that's a whole different thing. And I just wish much success with your broadcast and with your podcast and what you're doing. It's great to be able to have a conversation with another brother, just talking about being a man and what that involves. And so much success to you. Please send me the link so I can post it on my social media.
Absolutely.
So we give you additional, views and things like that. But
sure.
Invite me back anytime. I enjoy talking about these kinds of things.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you. This has been another episode of Conversation of the Heart. See you guys next week. Peace.